there is a comforting belief most people carry well into adulthood. That access to you is neutral. That emotional openness is a virtue without cost. That if you are clear, kind, and reasonable enough, life will meet you with the same care. This belief works for a while. In the first half of life, the psyche is oriented toward adaptation. Belonging precedes boundaries. Approval precedes authority. You learn who to be by sensing what is expected. Carl Jung observed that during this phase, identity is not yet inhabited. It is negotiated. You explain yourself quickly. You adjust your tone instinctively. You offer emotional availability before anyone asks for it. From the outside, this looks like maturity. From the inside, it feels like participation. Jung described this state as participation mystique, a condition in which the boundary between self and environment remains unconsciously porous. You do not yet experience yourself as a separate psychological center. You are responsive, attuned, open. At work, this manifests as reliability without limits. In relationships, as empathy without containment. You are present everywhere, except fully within yourself. Nothing feels wrong at first. You are praised for your adaptability. You are trusted for your emotional availability. But over time, a subtle imbalance begins to register. Energy flows outward continuously, but little returns transformed. Rest stops restoring. Explanation stops clarifying. Care begins to feel like leakage rather than connection. This is not burnout yet. It is quieter than that. It appears as a faint resistance to being pulled, a growing reluctance to justify yourself again, an irritation that feels disproportionate but persistent. Most people interpret this as fatigue or cynicism. Jung would interpret it differently. He would say the psyche is preparing a correction, not a rebellion, not a withdrawal from life, but a withdrawal of access. Here is the uncomfortable truth rarely articulated. Pressure only works where access exists. Expectation only functions where permission is granted. Emotional influence requires an open channel. In early adulthood, these channels remain wide by necessity. The psyche is still forming its internal center of gravity, so it borrows orientation from the environment. You sense moods before words. You anticipate reactions before decisions. You adapt before you are asked. This is not weakness. It is developmental intelligence. But when this pattern persists beyond its usefulness, the psyche intervenes. Jung understood the psyche as self-regulating. When consciousness remains fixated on adaptation, the unconscious compensates. That compensation rarely announces itself dramatically. It arrives as disinterest, as disengagement from emotional urgency, as the quiet collapse of concern for how things appear. At first, this is deeply confusing. You may try to recover the old responsiveness. You wonder why praise feels flat, why criticism lands without penetration. This is where many people misdiagnose themselves. They assume they are becoming detached or cold. They try to force warmth back into the system. But what is actually dissolving is unconscious consent. The psyche is relocating authority. Instead of asking, "How am I being perceived?" it begins asking, "What am I allowing access to internally?" This question marks a turning point, because once access becomes conditional, influence loses its automatic power. Not through resistance, but through absence of invitation. Externally, little changes. You still speak. You still participate. Internally, the emotional contract has been rewritten. The door others once used remains closed, not by force, but by irrelevance. This is the silent boundary Jung hinted at, but never sensationalized. And once it forms, it does not respond to pressure. Every psychological correction has an origin, not a single event, but an accumulation of moments where energy was given without containment. Often, the shift follows over-responsibility. You mediated what was not yours. You explained yourself to those who were not listening. You carried emotional weight in rooms that offered no reciprocity. Eventually, the psyche recognizes a pattern. Consider a simple, concrete example. A professional setting where you are consistently relied upon. You answer messages quickly. You anticipate problems before they surface. You become the stabilizing force. At first, this earns trust, then expectation, then entitlement. One day, you pause before responding, not out of strategy, out of fatigue that has reached clarity. Nothing dramatic happens, no confrontation, but something shifts. The urgency on the other side feels strangely hollow. The pressure fails to mobilize you. The familiar pull does not engage. This is the moment the psyche withdraws access, not as punishment, as preservation. Jung believed such moments signal the ego's failure to serve the deeper self. When adaptation begins to threaten individuation, the psyche intervenes. This intervention feels like silence, like a refusal to explain further, like an internal no that does not require articulation. Others may misinterpret this shift. They sense less emotional availability, less immediate reassurance. But internally, something essential is stabilizing. Energy is no longer leaking outward indiscriminately. It is being conserved for integration. This is the true rupture, not with others, but with the old internal arrangement. And once this rupture occurs, the psyche does not revert. As this new structure stabilizes, behavior changes without intention. You are no longer reactive, yet not disengaged. You are present, but not absorbent. Your responses slow, not from calculation, from absence of internal pressure. At work, this appears as clarity without urgency. In relationships, as warmth without self-erasure. People may attempt to re-establish the old access unconsciously. They repeat patterns. They escalate emotion. They test availability. Nothing happens, not because you resist, because there is nothing to hook into. Jung described this phase as the ego's subordination to a deeper organizing principle. The self replaces the environment as the primary reference point. This is why the shift cannot be imitated. Coldness creates tension. Withdrawal creates absence. Sovereignty creates stillness. Stillness unsettles those accustomed to leverage, not because it is threatening, because it does not respond. There is no visible boundary to cross, no line to challenge, only a quiet sense that access is no longer assumed. This is the paradox. True psychological authority does not announce itself. It does not correct misunderstanding. It does not negotiate its existence. It simply reorganizes the field around it, and the world adapts. What emerges on the other side of this shift is not invulnerability. You still feel, you still care, you still relate, but you are no longer organized around response. Jung believed the second half of life demanded this reversal. Energy returns inward. Meaning replaces approval. Orientation replaces performance. Those who resist this shift remain externally functional, but internally depleted. Those who accept it appear quieter and strangely unmovable. They are no longer negotiating access. They have withdrawn it. This is what psychological sovereignty actually looks like. Not dominance, not detachment, but consent restored to its proper place. Nothing enters the psyche without invitation. Nothing extracts energy without consequence. This is not a state to achieve. It is a structure to grow into. And once it forms, it does not need defense. Because access, once withdrawn, does not argue.